All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So, in this one, I wanted to point out the key difference between the Jerod Mayo Patriot situation and the Aaron Glenn potential firing after one season with the Jets, right? There are a lot of people that look at Aaron Glenn and compare him directly to Jerod Mayo, right? First-time head coach, former player. He just so happened to play for the team that he's coaching for. First season doesn't go well. There are talks of the team quitting after one season, and as we all know, the New England Patriots moved on from Jerod Mayo, and they are in the 1 seed 1 year later. However, I don't necessarily think that's all on Mike Vrabel. I think Josh McDaniels deserves a ton of credit. We also have to factor in that the team has Drake May and had top 5 picks in every round, and plus handed out, I want to say, over a total of $360 million in total contracts last season. Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, Stephon Diggs, Harold, all these guys. So, of course, we can't give all the credit to Mike Vrabel here. This was a massive organizational shift. But, again, there are a lot of people suggesting, hey, is Aaron Glenn going to be the next Jerod Mayo here, where the team, the Jets here, ownership, they look at Glenn and they say, this is not working. We're going to move on. And the hope would be that the pastures are greener on the other side of the fence. And when you hire your new coach, everything is all good and we're winning a bunch of games and everything's great. I think the big key difference here, and further than just Jerod Mayo, we can even extend this conversation, extend this topic to the Denver Broncos when they made Nathaniel Hackett a one and done as well, right? Where, again, losing games, players quitting, lots of just anger from the fan base. Not really what a lot of people expected. You had the Russell Wilson disaster, at quarterback, and the Denver Broncos, again, made Nathaniel Hackett a one and done. Here's the key difference. In both situations, Denver Broncos Hackett, New England Patriots Jerod Mayo, what was the following move? What was the next domino to fall? It was obvious. It was anticipated. It was expected. They had two fantastic options, looking them right in the face. I mean, we all remember the exact timeline of events, right? Mike Vrabel was never realistic for the Jets once that Patriots job opened up. I mean, was it really a coincidence that the Jets interviewed Vrabel on January 2nd or January 3rd? I believe January 3rd was the day where that news became public. And then on January 5th, after reports suggesting that New England was going to stick with Jerod Mayo, they fired him late. They fired him late, a day or two after news comes out that the Jets are looking into Mike Vrabel. Again, after Mike Vrabel decided to hop back into the head coaching carousel, right? Because he did have that one season where he kind of assisted Cleveland. He was on that staff. I mean, he could have hopped back into another head job at that point, but now, he wanted that one gap season. Again, spent it with Cleveland. I believe he's from Ohio, so, I get it completely. But again, interviewed with the Jets. 2 days later, New England fires Mayo, and from that point, was there even one person that expected anything different? Everybody saw it coming. In the case of Denver, right, one season disaster. Nathaniel Hackett, first-time head coach, clearly was not ready for the role. They move on, and what do they quickly do? They pivot to Sean Payton. Sean Payton just so happens to come out of coaching retirement. Who is that coach for the Jets? Who is that guy on the other side of the fence that is looking us right in the face realistically? Because again, the optics around the Patriots, the optics around the Denver Broncos suggest well-ran organizations. With the Jets, if we think back to last season, not a good reputation. They were literally ranked last on multiple head coaching vacancy lists on the least desirable job. They don't have a quarterback. It's going to get worse before it gets better. They have a lot of roster holes. Joe Douglas left the team desolate in a bad position. You still have to figure out the Aaron Rodgers contract, right? I mean, how many times have we heard, Justin Fields has gotten 30. I've heard Justin Fields has gotten paid $30 million, probably 100 times compared to what we heard Joe Douglas paid Aaron Rodgers, the remainder of that contract, which was over $100 million, which we are still having to pay off in 2026. Yes, losing, dysfunction, athletic reports, leaks coming out of the building, not having a quarterback, not a desirable job, right? And that was last year. So if the Jets do decide to fire Aaron Glenn after one season, my question is, who is that coach? Who is that coach that right now is on the outside looking at the Jets, who is eager, who is excited, who is qualified, who makes sense and wants this Jets job to take them over the top? Who is the Jets Vrabel? Who is the Jets Sean Payton? And by no means am I defending Glenn. I have a lot of questions about Aaron Glenn, man. I like these press conferences are really rubbing me the wrong way. Saying one thing and then coming out like literally the day after, talking about players' efforts and whatnot, and then like trying to retract. It just feels like damage control. And again, I figured the Jets were going to lose a bunch of games. I mean, just look at the roster, right? We don't have a lot of talent. We don't have virtually any depth. Again, and that this was a thing last season. The mirage that the Jets were some playoff caliber team and coaching was poor and that's why we didn't succeed is just wrong. 5 wins with all those stars, 5 wins, and 4 out of those 5 wins came against the worst teams in football, right? The Hackett, the Saleh, the Ulbrich, the Rodgers-led Jets, the Joe Douglas-led Jets. It's not like we had this catastrophic fall off. No, we've been at the bottom for a couple years now. And so again, everyone assumed that the Jets were going to lose a bunch of games this season, but it's gotten to a point now where for context, I don't even do preview videos for the Jets anymore this season because they're pointless. It's an unserious team. I don't even know if the organization wants to win these games. What is happening throughout the week? When they line up, they just get blown out. I mean, it was 35-3 at halftime against the New England Patriots, and granted, New England's a great team. I get that. But 35-3, I mean, this is professional football. This is not SEC versus FCS. This is professional football here in a divisional rivalry game. 35-3, and there's no quarterback change. There's no sense of urgency. Like, it's just kind of status quo. So, and again, to hit that press conference after that Patriots blowout and to question the coaches and players' efforts, and then to come out on Monday and say, wait, no, after watching the tape, the effort was there. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. And I think we're seeing the biggest fear that a lot of Jets fans had, right? Ask a Jet fan a year ago. Think back to conversations. Ask yourself a year ago, what was the number one thing you wanted in most cases out of a Jets head coach? The next one, post Saleh, post Ulbrich, what was the number one thing that you wanted? Most people would say head coaching experience. Glenn doesn't have it. Why would head coaching experience be important? Well, the theory would be they can handle situations better. They've been in that situation before. They've handled wins. They've handled losses. They've had things that have worked. They've had things that maybe didn't work before in the past, but now you're jumping into a new opportunity with a bulk of knowledge, a laundry list full of experiences that you can look off of. Again, positive ones, negative ones, situations that you might want to take back or want to redo. You now have that opportunity to make it happen. Now, is it a bulletproof plan? No. Look at Adam Gase when we got him from Miami. Look at Pete Carroll. The worst team in football is led by Pete Carroll. There were a lot of fans that wanted Pete Carroll for the Jets. That conversation has pretty much disappeared. If Pete Carroll and the Raiders had 7, 8, 9 wins, I feel like you would be getting a lot of those kind of twist the knife comments on social media saying, we should have hired Pete. We should have hired Pete. Experienced head coach and culture builder and this and that, players love him. But because he has 2 wins, everyone's out on Pete Carroll, and he's being talked about as potential one and done as well. So head coaching experience is not some bulletproof plan, but right now it just feels like the Jets are just kind of existing out there. Like they're just showing up to the games because they have to, and they just get blown out, and then you're getting these strange pressures from Aaron Glenn. And so my argument is not, we must keep Glenn because he's the guy to turn it around. No, I'm simply pointing out the question. What's the plan after? What's the ensuing domino that's going to fall? The Jets are not in a position like the Patriots were with Mike Vrabel or the Broncos were with Sean Payton, where you have a qualified, experienced, fantastic A+ hire. looking at you saying, I want the job. The reality is there is a chance that if the Jets fire Aaron Glenn, we could hire a coach that is potentially worse, right? If you think of like what's a situation like when the 49ers and Jim Harbaugh parted ways, there was kind of this weird aura around San Francisco, and they hired Jim Tom Sula as the head coach, and they were really brash about it, like he's the next guy and he's like the Steve Kerr of football and everything, comparing it to like Mark Jackson and like the Bay Area and whatnot. And he won 5 games and was fired in one season, and a lot of coaching candidates were like, yeah, we're not going to San Francisco. Look at how much of a disaster that is. No one wanted the job, and they hired Chip Kelly. And what happened there? Another horrible season, another wasted season, and he was fired after 1 year as well. And it wasn't until the team just completely gutted out the entire roster, hired John Lynch, and then they bring in Kyle Shanahan and they pay him a ton with a lot of control. And then from that point, they had 2 more losing seasons. I think they had 5 or 6 wins in year 1 of Shanahan, and then they went backwards in year 2 with 4 wins. And then Shanahan was on the hot seat. And then by that point, they had, a couple drafts loaded into the roster, and he started to build from there. So, again, I'm not sitting here saying I've seen enough from Aaron Glenn to keep him around. I haven't. I have questions about Glenn. And I think a lot of the questions that we had as fans are coming to fruition, right? When Glenn was the choice, which is, okay, Glenn seems really cool. He's qualified for the job. He's a former Jet, awesome leader of men, great reputation everywhere you turn to, anybody you talk to, including a guy in Sean Payton. But we have questions about experience level. How does he handle these situations being a first-time head coach? How does he handle building a staff? Well, Steve Wilkes is already fired. The defense is just a complete disaster. And we're sitting here a year later, and if I ask you the question, what's a Tanner Engstrand offense? If you say, I don't know, I'm right there with you. That's not a good position to be in after a full season of NFL football. And we're looking at the offensive coordinator saying, what are his tendencies? What does he want to do? What does he want to accomplish? We don't know based off of the talent around it and because Tanner's a first-year offensive coordinator. So, again, I'm not defending Glenn here, but I am saying in the event that they do fire Glenn, they better have a plan. Woody, I'm assuming Darren Muji would stay. Because, you just don't fire a general manager after one season. And I've actually been really impressed with Darren Muji, all things considered. I think he's done a pretty good job with limited resources with adding talent to this team. I am really excited to see what Darren Muji does in the offseason with these draft picks and with this cap space. I'm really, really excited about it. I think he could really bolster up the team. I think there's so many players that make sense in both free agency and the draft, as well as potential trade targets that this team can look at. Right? Not to mention waiver claims and day 3 guys, on the draft and everything. Point is, if you want to explore it here, right? Let's just hypothetically say, okay, the season ends, Black Monday, the Jets decide to fire Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji stays. What's the pivoting move, right? You're waking up the next day, Glenn is gone. We're not getting a trophy for that. No, you need to now go out and hire a qualified head coach. And if you don't hire a qualified head coach, you are essentially a bigger laughingstock than you were the year before and even the year before that. Where, mind you, the reputation again of the Jets is was very low. Firing Saul after 5 games was just simply not a good look. I think we could all attest to that. We said it at the time. Coaches, coordinators, guys around the league look at that situation and they're like, I don't want to be the next Saleh. I don't want to be the next potential Aaron Glenn here, getting canned after 1 season. So I think right off the bat, we can cross off the top tier names, just like we did a year ago. The Jets did not sit down with Mike McCarthy a year ago. We did not sit down with Ben Johnson a year ago. There was not even a mention of it anywhere that the Jets have requested to interview Ben, or there's heavy interest there. They're making a full court press to go land this guy. We just weren't in the market for these top end candidates. Now, of course, Vrabel sat down with the Jets, but it was his first interview after deciding, okay, you know what? Let me hop back into the head coaching carousel. And so who would be the potential top tier candidates here? No Mike Tomlin, no John Harbaugh. I've seen some like unrealistic stuff, right? Oh, we need a cross our fingers that Andy Reid retires so then we can convince him to come out of retirement and then we can send Kansas City a draft pick. No, it's just too unrealistic. No Reid, no Harbaugh, no Tomlin. I also think there's another coaching candidate that the Jets have had plenty of opportunities to either hire or interview in Cliff Kingsbury. I just feel like that ship has sailed. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury decided to stay as the Washington Commander OC a year ago. The rumor was if he wanted the Saints job, it was there. He could have accepted it. But he chose to stick as Washington's OC. Like, he's looking for the perfect spot for him. And not only did the Jets have the opportunity to interview him a year ago, which, again, that news never came out that the Jets actually met with him or even had interest to interview him. And we also had no interest from Cliff's side of things. But if we think back to 2019, when the Jets, after Darnold's rookie year, they fired Todd Bowles. And there were a lot of head coaches that I really, really, really wanted the Jets to target. Matt LaFleur was one of those guys. Zach Taylor was one of those guys. Mike McCarthy was one of those guys. We all talked about it, right? And Cliff Kingsbury was fired at Texas Tech, but one of the strangest situations I think I've ever seen where a coach in college gets fired for underperforming and not having a winning record, and he becomes one of the hottest names in the NFL. Right, that was kind of like when the league was fascinated with the young, up-and-coming, innovative offensive mind. Cliff Kingsbury interviewed with the Jets, and supposedly he chose the Arizona Cardinals over New York. And at the time, Arizona had the number 1 overall pick, and he just so happened to have Kyler Murray come out of the draft and who won a Heisman and won a lot of games, essentially running his system at the collegiate level, or a variation of his system, a version of it. And then I think if you take a look at some of like the middle of the road candidates, right, the guys that you hear a lot, the guys that we talked a lot about last season, the guys that interviewed with the Jets a year ago, the Arthur Smiths, the Matt Nagy's, the Steve Spagnuolos, the Vance Josephs of the world, that kind of feels like the world that the Brian Flores, that's going to be the world that the Jets are living in here. But you could even push back at that statement and say, well, the Jets literally a year ago passed over these coaches. Why would they want to, Arthur Smith has had tons of interviews with the Jets throughout the years. And he's never gotten, is there a point where these coaches just look at the Jets and they're like, you know what? No, we've had enough. You've had the opportunity to hire me before in the past. You went in a different direction. I'm okay somewhere else. I'm going to explore other options. However, I do think that if Glenn would be, fired, the front runner would probably be Vance Joseph because of, his stock is at an all-time high. We're seeing what the Denver Broncos defense is doing. He's actually one of my favorite coaches in football and was on my personal short list last year, even though it wasn't a popular candidate, but he has the head coaching experience. He's been around for a long time, a really, really good, genuine dude as well. You got to imagine that Muji's going to want to target someone that he's worked with before in the past, because if we think about it, Muji wasn't interviewing Arthur Smith. Muji wasn't interviewing Aaron Glenn. No, for whatever reason, the Jets decided to hire a head coach first, which again was questionable at the time. They hired Glenn first, and then they brought in Muji afterwards. And so, this theoretical Muji would be hiring his head coach. I would assume the front runner would be Vance. Is that something that you're okay with? Because he's not an offensive mind. He doesn't have a track record of winning a lot. He doesn't have a track record of developing a quarterback or finding a quarterback. Personally, again, I love Vance, but I know that's not going to sit well with everybody. I also think Brian Flores should have some legitimate interest. I mean, he was my number 1 candidate, realistic candidate from a year ago. I loved how he was from New York. I love how he has a chip on his shoulder. I love his defense first and foremost, but I think what's really cool about Flores is his unique background. All those years with the Patriots, coming up with the Patriots program, working his way up slowly through the totem pole, getting the head coaching job with the Miami Dolphins, it not going well, him having like that hatred for Miami. Like, this guy knows the AFC East, man. He's from New, it just made, to me at least, perfect sense. Of course, the question was, again, can he find a competent offensive coordinator? Can he find a quarterback? Can he develop a quarterback? Can he have offensive success? But I always loved Flores from a leadership standpoint. And I also love that he had head coaching experience. And quite frankly, I don't think he was that bad of a head coach, if we're being real. But we also have to talk about like the potential bounce back rebound types of coaches, which, unfortunately, like that would be the position that the Jets are in right now. We're talking Brian Callahan, Brian Daboll, Pete Carroll. I mean, Todd Bowles is on the hot seat, but obviously he's not going to be coming back to the Jets. And it also looks like some of the other, maybe more attractive potential rebound coaches that would get fired and then immediately jump back in are safe. It's looking like the Atlanta Falcons are turning things around with Raheem Morris, Mike McDaniel, right? The big time win against Tampa that potentially saved his job. It's also looking like Zach Taylor is going to be back with the Cincinnati Bengals, as well as Kevin Stefanski. Supposedly that win against Pittsburgh really went over well with Browns ownership, apparently. So this is this is the world that we're in the event that the Jets fire Aaron Glenn. There is no, at least right now, there is no Vrabel level of coach. There's no Sean Payton level of coach on the other side of the Glenn firing that is just waiting. Yes, here's my opportunity. It's going to be someone like this. Let's quickly just pull up the odds of it. Keep in mind, the Titans fired Brian Callahan mid-season. The Giants fired Brian Daboll mid-season to get a head start on the search, to really dive in and explore all these options. Here's the odds for both teams. And as you can see, there is a lot of first-year names. Chris Shula, Jeff Hafley. There's a lot of first-year guys. And there's also a lot of the same guys that we talked about literally for the Jets job a year ago. Now, I also think that you could potentially push for an old school veteran coach, right? If the Jets called Marvin Lewis, if the Jets called Bill O'Brien, if the Jets called Jay Gruden, Jason Garrett, Jack Del Rio, you got to imagine that they would at least pick up the phone and entertain it, right? Because of where they're currently. Bill O'Brien, I'm not 100% sure because I know he's from the Boston area, current Boston College head coach, and loves that school. I believe his wife went to Boston College, loves that school and loves that job and wanted to be closer to home. But, if the Jets come calling as a potential head coach to jump back to the league, I don't know if he would turn that down to stay at BC. I mean, Hafley left the Boston College head coaching gig to become a Packers DC, not even a head coach. Rick Spielman, I would imagine, would continue to be a part of the front office. Would Mike Zimmer get a look? Again, these are the names that we would have to talk about. And for me, I'm okay with some of them. Like Marvin Lewis is one of my favorite all-time coaches. I love what he did, kind of bringing the bank, really establishing what the Bengals are today, right? Digging them out of this horrible, horrible hole in the 90s. And I know everyone makes fun of Marvin Lewis, but pre-Marvin Lewis, the Bengals were just a laughingstock. Losing season after losing season after losing season after losing season. Marvin Lewis was the one that really changed the identity and culture around Cincinnati. I mean, I sound like a broken record with Brian Flores, and I would be on board with Vance, but there's a chance that, again, we fire Aaron Glenn. Like, if you're a Patriot fan, you fire Jerod Mayo and you get the notification that you're hiring Mike Vrabel, you're freaking fired up. If the Jets fire Aaron Glenn after one season, and 2 weeks later we look down at our phone randomly in the middle of the day and it says, breaking news from Adam Schefter, the Jets have agreed to terms with Arthur Smith on a 4-year contract. Would you be fired up for that? Or breaking news from Ian Rappaport, the Jets have agreed to terms with former Titans head coach Brian Callahan or Brian Daboll. One name that's interesting, again, it looks like he's going to be safe for next season, but just to quickly revisit it, Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski, I'll tell you what, man, Kevin Stefanski has got to be the weirdest case study in the National Football League. Ask yourself, just not thinking too much about it, just you get the notification the Jets agree to terms with Kevin Stefanski. He's fired from Cleveland and he becomes the next head coach of the Jets. How would you feel? Initially, like I like, again, this is the weirdest thing. I would feel good, like former head coach, respected around the league, offensive guy, he's called plays. He's an adult. He doesn't get overwhelmed. Cool. I can get down with Kevin. Like, I can get down with this. But if you look at the results, they tell a completely different story. I think since the end of 2023, his head coaching record is 10-28. He's been there for a long time. Not to mention, the reason why the Browns are, again, one of the worst teams in football is because of his offense, not having an offensive line, not having weapons for the quarterback, right? You look at that defense, it's championship level. It's freaking, like, I would argue Cleveland is better than tons of defenses that are going to be making the playoffs this season. So you look directly at Kevin's offense. The hell's the problem, man? You've had years to build it, years of free agent classes and draft classes, and yeah, there's a couple young, exciting players, but 5 years into this thing, 6 years into this thing, going into next year, like, why are we still picking top 5, top 10? Not to mention the amount of quarterbacks that Stefanski has churned through, right? I mean, you had the whole Baker Mayfield situation where there was a falling out there. Not only does Baker just, former number 1 overall pick, walk out the door, but he gets better with Tampa. So he leaves Stefanski and gets better in Tampa. Granted, it was a longer road with Carolina and the Rams and whatnot, but still, we could all objectively say that Baker Mayfield is better today and last year compared to his days with, Stefanski, when he was kind of labeled as like a game manager at best. You have you're replacing Baker with the highest paid at the time player in the National Football League in Deshaun Watson, giving him a fully guaranteed deal, and at the same time trading away a humongous haul to go land Watson. Let me actually just quickly read off the amount of quarterbacks that have started games for Cleveland in the Stefanski era. So again, Baker, Deshaun Watson, but you also have Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, DTR, PJ Walker, Bailey Zappi, Jacoby Brissett, Case Keenum, Jeff Driscoll, Nick Mullins, Shedeur Sanders. Stefanski has not been here for 10, 15 years. He was hired in 2020? And how many quarterbacks did we just roll through? And one of them was the highest paid quarterback of all time. Again, at the time of Deshaun Watson. And another one was Baker Mayfield, who got better when he left. So again, Kevin Stefanski, weirdest situation. Because I'm still sitting here picturing Stefanski as like the Jets head coach. And I'm like, okay, not the worst thing in the world. He has some likable traits. And like, yeah, he's the offensive mind. But the results just tell you a completely different story here. Completely different story. Weirdest thing, man. Weirdest thing. And then, of course, we could also talk about the possibility of maybe a John Gruden or a Rex Ryan. Two guys that kind of feel like long shots. John Gruden, you just feel like is chomping at the bit to get back into the league, but you don't really feel like it's until he actually gets an interview, whether it's at the pro level or even at the college level, it's just kind of a hypothetical at this point. Like even on these Vegas is not trying to lose money here. John Gruden's not even mentioned in like the top 5 to top 10 in any job. So until Gruden actually has a sit down interview, I don't necessarily know if it's a realistic thing to talk about. But that could be someone with head coaching experience. He's an offensive mind that I would assume would take a cheaper deal. Because another thing that we have to factor in here, another reason why the Jets would be out on the top candidates to come to the Jets would ideally want a lot of power and a lot of money. If the Jets were to fire Glenn after one season, well, they still have to pay Glenn for 4 more years, 5 more years. I don't know how long the Glenn deal was. Did he sign a 6-year deal, a 5-year deal, a 4-year? I don't know. But I do know that the Jets still have to pay Glenn year after year after year, just like how Denver had to pay Hackett. I mean, does that feel like something that the Jets would do? Right, fire Glenn, continue to pay Glenn for the remainder of his deal, while simultaneously making a move for the top coach on the market, making him, I would assume, the highest paid coach ever, or one of the highest paid coaches ever, and giving him a ton of power within the organization at the same time, paying out so much money to Harbaugh and paying Glenn. And you got to imagine, okay, if John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin is coming in, they're going to want their own front office. So you're going to probably have to potentially pay Darren Muji and another front office coming in. it just doesn't strike me as something that the Jets would do. And then, of course, if we take a look at Rex, I love Rex. I really, really do. But is he the best fit? I think the best fit for Rex Ryan would be like this advisory ambassador type of, like, I would want Rex to help try to find the next head coach. Like, I think he knows the ownership, he knows the fan base, he knows the market, he knows the media, he knows what it takes to win here. And I think he would be a very good mentor or advisor for whoever were to walk in the door, whether you're a veteran or you're a young guy. But as far as head coach, I do, I would still have the same questions about Rex that I did, when he was here, which is same deal with Todd Bowles. Can he find a competent offensive coordinator? Does he give any input on the offensive side of the football? Can he find a quarterback? Can he develop a quarterback? And also, too, as much as I love Rex, when the players or when the veteran talent started to leave or retire, or they ultimately got outpriced, and you started to have to rely on draft picks, the development of players was not really there. I mean, how many busts did we select in that era? Kyle Wilson and D. Milner and, man, there's a lot of players that the Jets swung and missed on, right? Like, think about those Idzik drafts, Jason Morrow, Quentin Coples was, a mid-first rounder. Like, there were a lot of misses there. I don't necessarily think it was the only reason why all these guys didn't pan out, but I do think it was a part of it, right? The player development side when Rex was here just never really felt like it was there. Rex, I feel like, would be an awesome fit for a team that's built to win right now. Right now, you have a lot of positions figured out. You have a great quarterback option. Rex can come in, energize, and move forward. Whereas if you're a bad team trying to rebuild and you're going to want to try to build the team up with young players, unless he hires a bunch and really prioritizes the development and the kind of the long-term plan. But even then, we still don't know if he could find a quarterback and whatnot. Unfortunately, I wish he could, because he would be high on my list if he could. And so to wrap it up, I'm not going to sit here and defend Glenn, talking about he's the guy and I feel great about it moving forward. But if they decide to fire him, the assumption cannot be Denver Broncos. Sean Payton walks in the door, turns everything around. The assumption cannot be New England Patriots. Mike Vrabel just walks in and turns everything around. There is a real possibility that if the Jets do decide to, a team that does not have a good reputation, if they decide to make Aaron Glenn a one and done, tons of candidates could look at the Jets and say, I don't want that to be me. I don't want to be the next one and done. Why would I go there? I do think there's some candidates that maybe make some sense. Again, Flores and some veteran minds, Vance Joseph I like, but there is a realistic chance that we can wake up one morning and see the Ian Rappaport breaking news saying that the Jets have agreed to terms with Brian Callahan or Arthur Smith. And then we would get some sort of ensuing story suggesting that nobody wanted the Jets job because nobody wanted to be a potential potentially Aaron Glenn, where he's fired after one season, or Robert Saleh, where he's fired after the 5 games. Of course, Saleh had the 3 years before that, as we all know, but it's still not a good look to fire someone that early on in the season. You probably should have just done it before, right? You fired Saleh before that year even began. Cleaned house at that point. And so, man, if the Jets decide to keep Aaron Glenn or fire Aaron Glenn, I have a lot of confidence in Darren Muji still. Again, despite the record, despite what the roster looks like right now, he's not even been here for a full calendar year, and he's made numerous upgrades and additions to this roster. So far, I'm really loving this draft class so far. I think he's done a good job of finding diamonds in the rough, and, not really, it's not like we had a top 5 pick or anything, and Armand Membu's literally one of this draft class so far, like, landscape of the NFL has not been all that great, not been all that impressive. There's been a couple hits, and thankfully, Darren Mushi's found multiple hits in this so not looking too great draft class, which I think gives me a ton of confidence moving forward, again, with or without Glenn here. But again, if Glenn is the guy moving forward and they don't fire him, we better be making upgrades. We better be addressing edge. We better be addressing defensive tackle. We better hire a qualified defensive coordinator that can come in and not be overwhelmed and actually bring something to the table, unlike Steve Wilkes. And we better bring in an offensive advisor, whether it's Scott Turner's dad, Norv, whether it's bringing in one of these old school vet minds, Todd Haley, right? Making someone an assistant head coach, if that's what it takes. You know, one of the reasons why I think the Lions and even like a team like the Eagles were so successful, because, I mean, you look at the coaching staff, they're huge. It's a long list of all these good football minds, offensively, defensively, clock management, special team, like every facet, they have somebody for. So, I mean, as Jets fans, like how many times can we go through the cycle with just going with the inexperienced route and not being prepared, not having the foresight, not being proactive. So again, I love Muji, and if Glenn stays, we really got to bolster up this team. We have to. But if the Jets are sick of where they're at, they're sick of the blowouts or whatever, they decide to change their mind and fire Glenn after the season, and Darren wants to go out and get his guy, I trust Muji to make that decision. Although I think it would probably be Vance Joseph, given the connection and whatnot, right? Going back to Denver. I don't know if it's fair to bring up, Darren Muji was in Denver when Nathaniel Hackett was a one and done. So you can maybe say, Muji has experience working in the, I don't know. That feels like a stretch to say, because again, he wasn't a shot caller in Denver, and Sean Payton was still right there looming from the outside that wanted the job that came out of retirement, right? So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Longer video here. I appreciate you guys sticking all the way to the end. You guys mean the world, and hopefully we turn this thing around in the offseason. I'm still excited for the offseason, man. We got the draft picks, we got free agency, we got potential trades. I'm looking forward to it. But these blowouts have got to stop. These just ridiculous press conferences have got to stop with the backtracking and whatnot. I mean, come on. I like Aaron Glenn as a guy, but these press conferences are just irritating me. Very, very much so. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. And as always, go Jets.